You didn't get the job, or you didn't get the promotion, or you got the feedback after the interview, the debrief after the performance review, the quiet explanation after the decision was already made. And somewhere in the language, wrapped in careful, professional phrasing, was a version of the same two words. Culture fit. You weren't the right fit. The team has a strong culture. They were looking for someone who aligns with the values of the organization. You walked away trying to understand what you had done wrong. Nothing. Culture fit is not an assessment of your values. It is a mechanism for protecting an organization from people who might change it. My name is Zara. This is Zara versus the workplace. And today we are going to translate what culture fit actually means, the 4 things it is used to select for, and what it costs every organization that uses it as a primary filter. Picture someone, qualified beyond the requirements of the role, technically exceptional, every measurable criterion met or exceeded. The interviews go well, the skills questions, the case studies, the competency assessments, the feedback after each round is positive. Then comes the final conversation, the cultural interview. The one described as informal, as a chance to get to know each other, as an opportunity to see how you'd fit with the team. The conversation feels different. The questions are harder to prepare for. The criteria are impossible to identify in advance. And the decision that follows the rejection, the pass, the offer that goes to someone else, arrives with an explanation that cannot be argued with because it was never defined. Not quite the right fit. The team dynamic. The way we work here. The person leaves carrying a question that has no clean answer. What was I supposed to be that I wasn't? Here is the diagnosis. In most cases, the answer is simpler and more uncomfortable than any skills gap. You were supposed to be familiar, and you weren't familiar enough to the people making the decision. You met every requirement. The interviews went well. And then came the feedback, not quite the right culture fit. No specifics, no criteria, no way to argue with it or act on it. Culture fit is one of the most widely used and least examined hiring filters in professional environments, and today we're going to examine exactly what it is selecting for and what it is keeping out. There are 4 things culture fit actually measures in most organizational contexts. None of them are printed in any job description. All of them shape the outcome. Mechanism 1. Behavioral predictability. Organizations are systems that depend on predictability. Consistent processes, consistent communication styles, consistent responses to pressure and conflict. When hiring managers evaluate culture fit, the primary, if rarely articulated question is whether this person's behavior will be easy to anticipate and therefore easy to manage. The mechanism is risk aversion applied to human beings. A candidate who thinks differently, communicates differently, challenges assumptions, or brings a frame of reference that the existing team has not encountered before represents unpredictability, not incompetence, not misalignment of values, simply a variable the organization cannot confidently model. Culture fit, in this context, is a filter for manageability. The candidate who will produce no surprises is evaluated as a strong fit. The candidate who might, regardless of what those surprises could contribute, is evaluated as a risk. Culture fit often means we can predict you, and we prefer people we can predict. Mechanism 2, the similarity heuristic. Human beings make faster, more confident decisions about people who resemble people they already trust. This is a well-documented cognitive pattern, homophily, the tendency to affiliate with the familiar, and it operates with particular force in unstructured evaluations like cultural interviews, where the criteria are subjective and the assessment is largely intuitive. When a hiring panel describes a candidate as a strong culture fit, they are frequently describing a feeling, a recognition, a familiarity, a comfort with the person's communication style, references, sense of humor, or social context. That feeling is genuine. Its source, however, is not cultural alignment. It is similar. The person who went to similar schools, worked at similar organizations, communicates in similar registers, and occupies similar social contexts will generate that feeling reliably, regardless of whether they share the organization's stated values. The person who does not generate that feeling will be evaluated as not quite fitting regardless of how closely their actual values align. Culture fit is frequently similarity assessment conducted without acknowledgement that similarity is what is being assessed. Mechanism 3. The dissent prevention function. Organizations that have developed established ways of working specific processes, cultural norms, leadership styles, decision-making patterns have an institutional interest in maintaining those patterns even when they are ineffective. Change is costly. Disruption is uncomfortable. And the person most likely to identify and articulate what is not working is the person who arrives without the accumulated investment in how things have always been done. Culture fit functions in this context as a dissent prevention mechanism. The candidate who is likely to ask why things work the way they do, to propose alternatives, to push back on inherited assumptions, this person is evaluated as not fitting the culture. The candidate who is likely to absorb and replicate existing patterns without friction is evaluated as an excellent fit. The organization calls it alignment. What it is selecting for is compliance. An organization that hires exclusively for culture fit is an organization that is systematically selecting against the people most likely to improve it. Mechanism 4. The accountability diffusion. Culture fit rejections are structurally immune to challenge. Skills-based rejections can be argued the candidate did or did not demonstrate a specific competency, and that assessment can be questioned. Culture fit rejections cannot be argued because the criteria were never defined, the assessment was never documented, and the conclusion rests entirely on the subjective experience of the evaluator. This immunity is not incidental. It is the functional advantage of culture fit as a screening tool. It allows organizations to make decisions based on criteria they would not be willing to state explicitly, and to deliver those decisions in language that sounds principled rather than arbitrary. The candidate receives feedback that cannot be acted on, about criteria that were never disclosed, assessed by a process that was never defined. And the organization retains complete deniability because culture, by design, resists precise definition. Culture fit is the only hiring criterion that becomes more powerful the less it is defined. Here is what this produces at scale and over time. The organization that consistently hires for culture fit, that prioritizes behavioral predictability, similarity, compliance, and deniable exclusion, does not build a strong culture. It builds a closed one. A culture that gets progressively narrower as each new hire is selected for resemblance to the existing group rather than contribution to the work. The perspectives that would have identified the blind spots do not arrive. The challenges to inherited assumptions do not get raised. The processes that stopped working continue unchallenged because everyone in the building was selected, in part, for their willingness not to challenge them. And the organization calls this cohesion. Meanwhile, the candidates who were rejected for culture fit the ones who would have asked the uncomfortable questions, brought the unfamiliar frame, seen what the existing team could not see, took that capability to organizations that were willing to receive it. Every strong culture fit hire is a decision about what the organization is willing not to know. Here is the reframe that changes how you move through every hiring process from this point forward. Culture fit is not a verdict on your character, your values, or your capability. It is information about the organization's current appetite for difference, and it is some of the most useful information a hiring process can produce. An organization that rejects you for culture fit has told you something precise, that it is currently optimized for familiarity over contribution, for compliance over critical thinking, for the comfort of the existing group over the capability of the incoming one. That is not a rejection of your value. It is a disclosure of the organization's current limitations. A culture fit rejection is not the organization saying you are not good enough. It is the organization saying it is not ready for you. 3 moves. Executable in your next process. Move 1. Assess culture fit in both directions before the final round. In every cultural interview, ask one direct question. Can you describe a time when someone on this team significantly changed how the organization approached a problem and how that was received? The answer tells you whether the organization actually values the thing culture fit interviews claim to measure, or whether it is selecting for something else entirely. The quality of the answer is diagnostic. Move 2. Reframe your differentiation as an explicit asset, not a liability to manage. In cultural conversations, do not attempt to mirror the existing team's communication style in order to generate the familiar feeling. Instead, name your difference directly and connect it to organizational value. I tend to approach problems from a different angle than most teams I've joined, and in my experience, that has produced outcomes the existing approach wasn't generating. This positions distinctiveness as contribution rather than risk. Move 3. Use culture fit language as a screening criterion for organizations, not just a verdict from them. When an organization describes its culture in terms of harmony, alignment, and shared values without naming any specific behaviors or outcomes those values produce, treat that as a signal. Cultures defined by feeling rather than function are frequently cultures defined by exclusion rather than excellence. Ask what the culture has produced, not just what it feels like to be inside it. You were not too different for the role. You were too different for an organization that had stopped distinguishing between those two things. They told you it was about fit. It was about familiarity. It was about the comfort of the people making the decision. It was about an organization that had, over time, become better at reproducing itself than at improving itself, and that had built a hiring process specifically designed to continue doing exactly that. You were not the wrong person for the work. You were the wrong person for the closed system. Those are not the same thing. The organizations worth building a career inside are the ones that understand the difference between a culture that is strong and a culture that is merely uniform. Between values that produce results and values that produce compliance. Between fit and contribution. One of those things builds organizations that last. The other builds organizations that feel comfortable until they don't. The most dangerous culture is the one that mistakes its own reflection for excellence. If you have ever been told you were not the right culture fit, drop the word fit in the comments. Just that word, nothing else. I want to know how many people watching this channel have been on the receiving end of that phrase. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing the things most workplaces will never tell you. I'm Zara, and this is Zara versus the Workplace.